Picture the most secure building in your city. Cameras everywhere, guards in rotation, reinforced steel doors that weigh more than a truck, alarm systems so sensitive they can detect a change in air pressure. Now picture someone robbing it, not by cutting the power, not by hacking the system, not by holding anyone at gunpoint, by going under it, while the guards drank coffee, while the cameras rolled, while the city slept, and by the time anyone noticed, he was already gone. His name was Doyle, not the name on his passport, not the name his mother gave him. The name the men who worked for him used quietly in parking garages and back booths of restaurants and text messages sent from burner phones. Just Doyle. And in the spring of 2003, he sat down across from a retired structural engineer in a diner in Lyon, France, ordered 2 coffees, and said 7 words that would eventually make international headlines. The engineer's name was Marcel Voss, 61 years old, 40 years building things, bridges, tunnels, metro systems beneath 6 European cities. Retired early after a dispute with a government contractor, bitter, short on money, and extraordinarily good at understanding what lies beneath the ground. Doyle had spent 3 months finding him, because what he was planning wasn't just a robbery, it was an engineering project. The target was the National Sécurité Vault, a private high-security storage facility in the 8th arrondissement of Paris. Not a bank, exactly, worse. The NSV was where banks sent things they didn't want stored in their own vaults. Bearer bonds, uncut diamonds, art, antiquities with questionable provenance, cash that didn't officially exist. No public records of what was inside. No insurance claims that would ever see a courtroom. No victim who could fully explain what they'd lost without incriminating themselves. It was, in the criminal world, considered the perfect target. It was also considered completely untouchable. The NSV sat on 6 inches of reinforced concrete over a limestone foundation. The perimeter was monitored by 12 cameras, 2 of which were hidden. The vault door itself, 6 tons of hardened chromium steel, a time lock mechanism, and a secondary biometric seal, had never been opened by anyone who wasn't authorized to open it. Every security expert who had ever studied it said the same thing. You cannot rob this place. Doyle disagreed. Here's what he knew. 3 buildings down, 180 feet away, sat a vacant commercial property. Ground floor retail, a failed bakery, lease expired 8 months ago. No new tenant. The owner collecting minimum rent from a storage company using the space for overflow. Below that building, beneath the bakery ovens, beneath the concrete slab, beneath the pipes and cables and the archaeology of a city 2,000 years old, limestone. The same limestone shelf the NSV sat on, one continuous geological formation running directly between the 2 buildings. Doyle had spent 4 months studying soil surveys, municipal infrastructure maps, and city geological records. He bribed a junior civil engineer at the Paris Water Authority for access to utility blueprints that were never meant to leave the building. He did the math. 180 feet of horizontal tunnel, 10 feet below street level through solid limestone was not easy, but it was possible. And not one security consultant, not one inspector, not one nervous vault engineer had thought to account for it, because nobody digs through limestone anymore. That's the thing about perfect security systems. They protect against what's been done before. Doyle assembled his crew over 6 weeks. He wasn't reckless about it. He didn't call old contacts who talked too much. He moved carefully, deliberately, the way a man moves when he knows that one wrong face across the table ends everything. The final crew was 9 people. Marcel Voss, the engineer, 40 years of underground construction knowledge in a retired man who needed to feel useful again. A woman named Celeste, a former telecommunications infrastructure technician who knew how to read the city's nervous system, fiber lines, power conduits, alarm relay nodes. 3 experienced miners, brothers from a small town in Belgium, who had spent 15 years in underground coal extraction before their mine closed and left them with extraordinary skills and nowhere to use them. A forger, a fence, a driver, and one person whose only job was to stand above ground every single night and watch. 9 people. Doyle had turned down 12 others. Size was risk. Every person added was another phone that could be traced, another mouth that could talk, another decision made under pressure that nobody could predict. 9 was already more than he wanted, but limestone doesn't move itself. They leased the old bakery under a shell company registered in Luxembourg. The paperwork was clean. The lease was paid 6 months in advance. They filed permits for interior renovation, asbestos removal, structural inspection, nothing that required active oversight. They moved in on a Tuesday. By Thursday, the ovens were gone, the floor tiles were up, and Marcel Voss was standing in the middle of the empty room with a surveying instrument, marking the exact point where they would begin. The first night, they dug 4 feet down and hit solid limestone. Marcel smiled. He had been hoping for clay. Clay was easier, but limestone was quieter. Here is something they don't tell you about digging a tunnel by hand. It is not fast, it is not dramatic, it is not a montage. It is 2 men in a space barely wide enough to turn around, in suffocating heat, breathing recycled air, chipping away at stone that has been hardening for 50 million years, 6 inches at a time, while another man crouches at the entrance, hauling debris in canvas bags that have to be carried up a ladder, through the building, out to a waiting van, and driven across the city before dawn, every night, for 11 weeks. Some nights they made 8 feet of progress, some nights 3. The limestone shifted twice, and they had to reinforce the walls with steel rods before continuing. Celeste identified a fiber optic relay line running 18 inches above their planned trajectory. They dropped 2 feet lower to pass beneath it, which cost them 11 additional days of digging. Nobody complained, because nobody else in the world was attempting this. At week 9, they found the foundation, not with instruments, not with ground-penetrating radar, which they couldn't risk using without attracting questions. They found it the old way. One of the Belgian brothers pressed his ear to the rock face and tapped, listening for the change in resonance. The hollow space beneath the NSV's concrete floor, 4 inches above the limestone shelf. He tapped 3 times. Looked back at Marcel. Marcel nodded. They were there. The breach took 16 hours across 2 nights. Diamond-tip rotary cutters, a vacuum system to contain the dust. They cut a core sample first, confirmed the depth of the concrete above them, then widened the hole 1 inch at a time until it was 30 inches across. They cleared the opening on a Friday night at 1:47 in the morning, and Doyle climbed through. He stood in the sub-basement of the National Sécurité vault. Bare concrete, low ceiling, ventilation ducts, 3 cardboard boxes that had been down there so long they had fused to the floor. And at the far end of the room, a service door, steel, hinged outward, no biometric lock, no keypad, just a deadbolt. Because nobody had thought to put a better lock on the inside of a building no one was supposed to be able to get into. Celeste had sourced the key 3 weeks earlier from a retired facilities manager who no longer worked at the NSV and hadn't thought twice about selling a copy of a key he assumed no longer mattered. Doyle unlocked the door, walked upstairs, and spent the next 4 hours inside the vault. What he took has never been fully confirmed. The NSV released no public accounting. Several of their clients, by nature of who they were and what they stored, never filed reports. What is known, he took 7 cases of documents, bearer bonds, negotiable internationally, issued under names that no longer existed, 3 sealed containers of uncut diamonds of unknown provenance, an indeterminate amount of physical currency in 4 denominations, and one particular item, a portfolio of 8 photographs, whose value and nature has never been publicly explained, but which apparently mattered enormously to at least one of the parties involved. He left the same way he came in, down the stairs, through the service door, through the sub-basement, into the tunnel, back through 180 feet of limestone, up the ladder into the old bakery. By 6:15 in the morning, Doyle was sitting in a car 3 kilometers away drinking coffee from a thermos. The NSV didn't discover the breach until Monday. Here's what makes this different from every other heist you've heard about. Nobody panicked. Nobody spent too fast. Nobody bought a car with sequential bills. Nobody called a girlfriend who told a cousin who mentioned it at a bar. Doyle had spent as much time planning the exit as he had the entry. Each member of the crew received their share through a series of real estate transactions across 4 countries, structured over 18 months, each one clean, each one documented, each one completely unremarkable to anyone looking at it from the outside. The Belgian brothers went back to Belgium. Celeste moved to Portugal. Marcel Voss bought a house on a lake and told his neighbors he had finally received his pension. Doyle disappeared entirely. The investigation lasted 3 years. Interpol, French National Police, 2 private security firms hired by the NSV at extraordinary cost. They found the tunnel, they found the bakery, they found the shell company registered in Luxembourg, which traced to another shell company in Cyprus, which traced to a name that had never existed. They found the retired facilities manager who had sold the key. He cooperated fully. He had no idea what he had done. They never found the crew. They never found the money. They never found Doyle. To this day, the National Sécurité Vault has never publicly acknowledged the full extent of what was taken. The case remains technically open. The tunnel has been sealed with 2 feet of concrete and steel plating. And somewhere, in a house on a lake or an apartment in a city you'd never guess. Or maybe just a quiet life lived carefully under a name nobody recognizes. The man who dug through 180 feet of limestone and walked into the most secure vault in Paris is still out there. He didn't make a mistake. He planned for everything, even this, even the part where we're still talking about him, and he's still nowhere to be found.